Today I'm explaining every branch in the Imperial military, from the Star Destroyers to the TIE Fighter pilots, the army with the Stormtroopers, Mud Troopers, and even Death Troopers, and then of course the specialty branches like the ISB, specializing in security and loyalty among Imperial subjects. I'll also briefly look at how Palpatine was able to disband the power of the Imperial Senate by the time of A New Hope. So for the overall structure, the Imperial military consisted of two main branches, the Imperial Army and the Imperial Navy, but there were 7 smaller branches, making it 9 branches in total, and the smaller yet still important ones were the Imperial Department of Military Research, the Diplomatic Corps, the Engineering Corps, the Survey and Exploration Corps, the Surgical Corps, Military Police, and the Imperial Intelligence. The matters of the Army and Navy were overlooked by the Joint Chiefs of the two branches, the mini-commanders of the two branches, which included the Chief of the Imperial Army and the Chief of the Imperial Navy, which was actually Cassio Tag for the Army and Admiral Motti for the Navy at the time of the Battle of Yavin, who we both see at this meeting on the Death Star during A New Hope. Also, the Stormtrooper Corps operated under the sight of the Army. The Emperor had supreme control over it all and discharged the responsibilities to Commander-in-Chief and Emperor's Fist, Darth Vader.
Impressive. Most impressive.
The direct responsibility of the army weren't for the Commander-in-Chief and were actually held by Supreme Commander like Tarkin and later Cassio Tag to alleviate some power. And I suppose that kind of answers the question people often have about how Tarkin actually kind of seems like he is above Vader in A New Hope, but that's just because for their roles in the military, he kind of does have a bigger say in many of the situations there, although Vader could certainly kill him at any point if he really wanted to. Also, there was a war ministry led by a Minister of War who oversaw the financial needs of the Imperial military, and I suppose that kind of explains how Darth Vader enlistment was available for human recruits and took place at Imperial academies across the galaxy to produce new stormtroopers and enlisted personnel. Also, the Empire had billions of soldiers during its height, which is a far greater number than the galaxy had ever known. As the Empire looked down on aliens, it was quite difficult to find alien members among the ranks, despite outliers such as Grand Admiral Thrawn existing. Following the Tarkin Doctrine, the Imperial military relied on fear, intimidation, and dread to keep star systems in line, as the sheer size and mental terror inflicted from Imperial Star Destroyers was enough to discourage major attacks. Also, it was difficult to assemble a group large enough to even bear a threat to the Star Destroyers before the alliance to restore the Republic rose to enough prominence, and the Empire often ignored the rules established at the Galactic Accord of Systems, which was established in 972 BBY, which I suppose is basically the Star Wars equivalent to the Geneva Convention, and hey, you know what they say, the more war crimes, the merrier.
Oh, yes,
I mean, it only makes sense with someone who was formerly Anakin Skywalker at the head of this military. Honestly, I don't even know why Vader was so sad all the time, considering he could now commit war crimes without limits. Since we already touched on the Imperial Army and Navy, I'll just briefly go over both of them. So for the Army, the Imperial Army was the ground forces of the Empire, which was in following of the Grand Army of the Republic, and they swiftly took control of the entire galaxy with well-trained soldiers, mechanized walkers, and overwhelming numbers. And one thing I wanted to answer for y'all going into this video is, if a Mud Trooper is technically an Imperial military trooper, then what does that make a Stormtrooper? But as we found out earlier, the Stormtrooper Corps was an offshoot of the Imperial military, so in a way, a more advanced trooper, whereas the Mud Troopers were the literal Imperial military troopers as the most basic untrained fighter for the army. They relied on the Imperial Navy to transport them in massive ships across the galaxy. And speaking of the Imperial Navy, they were made up of Star Destroyers and TIE Fighter variants, and while Darth Vader was at the start of the Galactic Empire's reign, the de facto authority over all naval forces, at the height of the Galactic Civil War, Lord Sidious made him Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet. even being able to lead Death Squadron, which had the Executor Superstar Destroyer in its midst. And that is of course the one we see in not only The Empire Strikes Back at Hoth, but also in Return of the Jedi above Endor. Next up is the Imperial Department of Military Research. The Imperial Department of Military Research actually helped the Imperial military by upgrading and creating new weapons and technology. At the same time, former companies friendly to the Republic helped manufacture newer Imperial vessels entering production, and some of the largest ones being at Senior Fleet Systems and Kott Drive Yards. Another branch we can knock off is Imperial Intelligence, which along with the Naval Intelligence Agency and Imperial Security Bureau, or ISB for short, which we saw more in Andor, worked in conjunction with the military of the Empire, as the ISB installed an officer on deck for every Star Destroyer and also surveyed the galaxy for information on where the Rebellion fleet was forming. Now before we go any further, how is the Imperial Senate mentioned in A New Hope and also shown in Andor dissolved by the Battle of Yavin? Well, you see, Palpatine maintained the Imperial Senate as an image of constitutional legitimacy, when in reality, it was simply a front to let him pass all of his laws. The regional governors of the galaxy began to gain more power as the military ignored more and more Senate decrees. Eventually, in 0BBY, Palpatine used the arrest of Leia Organa after the Battle of Scarif to show the questionable loyalty of the Imperial Senators, which allowed him to diminish it, granting himself full power. Moving back to the branches, however, the Diplomatic Corps actually sent Imperial diplomats to negotiate between governments and large organizations. The planetary governors would then make adjustments to allow for Imperial policy to better fit their planet. Now for the Engineering Corps, this was in many ways the smallest branch, with Viril Line Systems producing the IC-4A droid-operated combat engineering vehicle for the Engineering Corps. And the Survey and Exploration Corps, on the other hand, also known as the Imperial Survey Corps, or ISC, had the duty of exploration of the galaxy, and they actually mapped out the far reaches of wild space while also updating hyperspace data. And the Syrian Kitty Al-Arai was another rare example of an Imperial alien who was in fact a Syrian signals analyst for the Corps. But real quick, here's the Christian advice segment of this video. If you want to get back to the main video, skip to this time right here. Okay, so today we have another verse from the Apocrypha, and we're actually looking at the Wisdom of Solomon, specifically 2:19. So here it actually says, let us test him with insult and torture, so that we may find out how gentle he is and make trial of his forbearance. I find this very interesting, as it's almost like taking a person that is extremely faithful to God and is a really good person, really means good things, but maybe they have a few flaws here and there that people try to pick apart, and then they just really like push them and try to just do everything they can to really turn them into an evil person. It's almost like with the Dark Knight, where they're like, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I'm not trying to say I'm all, dark and edgy here. Oh, guys, I quoted the Dark Knight, right? Yeah, but good movie nonetheless, and I do think that is pretty interesting. I am enjoying the Wisdom of Solomon so far, that book in the Apocrypha. I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, there's some cool insightful knowledge in there. Like some of the books of the Bible, you'd be reading it and kind of just like skim over some things, even though you really shouldn't. With the Wisdom of Solomon, I've been really like taking in everything I've been reading. I feel like it's really, really good, and I just find it interesting for sure. But yeah, album of the week is actually going to Channel Orange by what's his name? Oh yeah, Frank Ocean, that guy. In fact, I might not have even said the name of the album right. I low-key haven't ever listened to Frank Ocean before now, but it's a pretty good album. I had pretty good songs on there for show. That was kind of cringe. And then also, oh yeah, if you have any comments on this video, you can leave them. If you have any questions, video suggestions, or just want to tell me how your week has been going. Also, make sure to check out the new merch store, merch drop for the winter, as it is pretty dope, can't even lie. Some really cool products on there. And, what else? Yeah, upload normal videos every Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, shorts every single day. But, yeah, back to the normal video. Now, for the Surgical Corps, while there isn't much on them in canon, looking over to Legends, we can see that they operated in surgical theaters on naval ships near planetary battlefields, ready to help wounded soldiers when needed, and they also helped create biological weapons because of their wide knowledge of medicine. They wore turquoise blue uniforms. For the military police, we have a little bit from canon and a little bit of Legends, but what we do know is that these were a separate faction of troopers which served along the Army Military Police and Navy Military Police, and they ensured that the members of the military acted within the laws of the Empire. So as we can see based off the information gathered in this video, the Empire is really too huge to truly understand every aspect of its military and structure. However, these main branches do give us a much better fleshed out idea of what the Palpatine had in mind when he wanted to conquer the galaxy and maintain what he would know as order, but what the citizens of the galaxy would know as imprisonment. And as incredibly cool as the Imperial military is, I already know you want to hear about every single Jedi Grand Master explained, and turns out I just did a video on it, which you can watch if you click right here. But yeah, see ya.